Here in the 21st century, of course, there's more choice than ever. It could be across streaming platforms, of course, apps and Fire Sticks, or we could be diving back into physical media collections on shiny discs, or blowing off some serious dust and hitting rewind literally on an old VHS tape from up in the loft. Who knows? All in search of a fix of something pre-seen and maybe pre-loved, or even giving something a second, third, or fourth chance that you didn't quite feel the first time. An old school movie or TV show. Lists that never seem to get any shorter. We're never going to get to the bottom of, are we? Let's face it. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks. Welcome to the show. This one is recorded in front of a live audience, and we'll be watching you, watching us, and taking your comments as always there from the live chat section across YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook too, as we shake off some dust and shake down another all-time great. All to relaunch our mission for this listed season. We're going to be talking about a proper blockbuster starring a huge star, no, literally huge star from the 80s and the 90s. Well, he's still a star sort of now, isn't he really? And a movie that's placed very precisely in the annals of pop culture and blockbuster history. I think you know which one I'm talking about by now. 1990s Total Recall. Of course it is. Directed by Paul Verhoeven and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. I can't wait to get started. I suspect that they can't either. So let's bring in my fellow channel hoppers. Fling open the doors and see who's waiting to take a seat. Happily, although he's been up to his neck in filming himself, we've managed to get him wrangling back with the promise of some proper movie geek talk, as befits the one and only mega geek himself, Ian David Diaz. Welcome back, mate.
Hello. Sorry. Yeah, I'm here.
No, that's you. Yeah, that's you.
Right.
You are Ian David Diaz. I know this for a fact.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Or good day.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Well, yeah, it's great.
You ready to go?
Yeah, definitely.
Take a seat. He insists. Number 6 insists that you make yourself comfortable and get stuck in. So, how's this week been? It's been a while since I've spoke to you. You okay?
Yeah, just working. Just too much work to do this week. But
well, you're going to love this, because when it comes to movies, Ian, any kind of movies really, they don't have to be old ones, but new ones too. Very first person I always think of is, I wonder what Ian thinks about that trailer or that classic, or wonder if he's seen that yet, because 9 times out of 10, whatever you've got to say about them always really surprises me. And I've known you for a few years now, but sincerely it does. I never know whether you're going to like something or hate it, or what you've seen that I haven't, with your look, your precise look from being behind the camera on so many movies.
Yeah. Well, I've got this t-shirt on Ed 209, which is... Yeah, there's obviously a link for the movie that we're talking about. But I can't wait to get stuck into this, into this film. Young Sharon Stone, eh? You know.
Enough of that. There could be children watching. Okay, let's bring in the rest of the kids. And it was John Yulden that came up with the idea for this particular show, so we can blame him. Hi, John.
Hey, how you doing? I'm the kid, so don't talk anything about Sharon Stone, mate, because that's outrageous. Yeah.
Good evening.
Superb.
Yes, keep thinking about Sharon Stone, you may well go blind. That's the...
Yeah. I've only watched it about 400 times.
I think the very first time I ever saw her was in the Police Academy movie. Was it the 4th one she was in with Steve Guttenberg?
That's right. Yeah. She's great in this as well, isn't she? You know, just... amazing. Yeah,
I can tell. He's speechless already, everybody. This is going to be a great one. Please like the video now. Can it possibly get any better? Like the video now. You're going to be having far too much fun later on. And subscribe to the channel. Check you're still subscribed. And give that cloister bell a good old bang. Yes, while we're talking about blondes there, blondes and banging, blondes in particular, let's turn to the final panelist that we've got waiting to come in. Now, he may not be blonde, but his logo definitely is. It's a logo that strikes fear into the hearts of into the hearts of Jodie Whittaker fans in particular. They love him there, and we love him too. It's the one and only Bowles Trek back on the channel. Hello, mate.
Hi.
Hi,
How
Chris.
is everyone?
Great, yeah.
I'm in solidarity with my friend Ian.
Yes.
We're not going to mention that show, which will not be mentioned by name. Hi. How is everybody? It's damn hot here. It's like 35. So.
Oh yeah.
Apparently
It's supposed to be hot here. It's the middle of summer here, but you would
Yeah.
never know it. It's bloody freezing.
You guys were talking about imminent death when it was going to be 26. This is normal for you.
This is true. This is true. We're going to think back to a time now where before we heard talk of any kind of climate change or anything like that, when summers were always roaring hot and when winters meant 6 inches worth of snow.
I have a funny story, Dan.
Yes.
Then I always have to start with some kind of funny story, and this one's hilarious.
You do.
Okay, so about mid-June, it was like really hot. It was like these types of temperatures, and everybody on the social medias was like, "Oh, this is climate change. Oh, we're all gonna die." Yes. Then the next day, so we did not break a record high, which was set back in 1995. I actually, and I'm old enough. I remember that because that was like literally we fried an egg on the pavement because we were young.
Really,
and this is what made things fun. But yes, where was it? Oh yeah, it's hot. So I got the fan on. We got AC. Sky's chilling with the bowl of ice cubes, and hello.
Hello, yeah, it's happy to have you back. We're going to be talking about something from the golden age, the golden time of the 1990s. So I think that story fits in perfectly to talk about this movie. But it's also these times as well, Chris, the 80s and the 90s. Now, they do remind me of a simpler time where you'd slam in the VHS tape and you'd pray that the tracking would hold, and you'd sit there watching a 4:3 version of something that had been on the big screen, and you'd sit there, you'd thrill to every single pulse pounding moment of these movies, wouldn't you? Even if you were too young to be seeing them.
Oh, I miss it so much, Dan. I'm old. I'm halfway to the half-century mark. That doesn't make any sense. I'm very close to that scary half-century mark. But I remember very clearly first watching this film, which came out in '89. We got it on the beta, because yes, my dad did beta. In early 1990, right before beta died, I probably was not old enough because I would have been 11. So do the math. You can see how old this bastard is now. I probably was too young to be watching it, but I didn't care. I thought this is the coolest thing ever. And I miss those days. I miss we didn't even have Blockbuster locally back in '89. We used to, there used to be this Ontario rental chain called Bandito Video. Had a big yellow sign.
Bandito, that's a brilliant name.
It's that's where I rented all the Star Trek movies. But no, every Friday we'd go to Bandito and we'd rent a video game and a movie. And I remember that week we got Total Recall, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And my dad's like, I don't think you should be watching this. I don't care. Then the 3 booby scene came up, and like, you really should be watching it. I really don't care.
The thing is, every time you say the word bandito, I have the urge to get the guns out, like that.
Actually, it was awesome. We had 2 of them locally. It had like a big yellow sign said Bandito, and a picture of a Bandito person on the side, which almost certainly would not be allowed today because we can't allow anything anymore. No. But yeah, it was that, and then eventually it went out of business, and then in the early 90s we got Blockbuster, and it just wasn't the same.
No, definitely. I mean, we didn't really get that here as such. I mean, this is the vision, though, isn't it? This is how we like to remember the VHS rental stores back in the 80s and the 90s. This is how we'd like it to be. The welcoming gaze and bosom there of an obliging assistant at a rental outlet.
You guys just banned everything. I'm like,
we did.
All my favorite movies growing up, if you look at the Video Nasties list, like every favorite movie I have is on there.
We
Yes.
didn't at the beginning when they opened independent video stores over here. There was really no certificate on any film. I remember going in there getting zombie flesh eaters. I think I was how old was I? And my everybody
6.
could go in there. Yeah, well, not that. Yeah. I'm just saying, there was no certificate when they were doing VHSs and betas on that before.
They are now the VHS tapes that trade with the highest value, aren't they? The pre-cert ones.
Yeah.
So you used to get adhesive stickers. What they would do in these rental shops is they would get adhesives and they would stick those on the spine with the new certificates there. But most of the time there weren't any on at all, particularly the horror films. I mean, John, this is what I tell myself it was like going to rent out a VHS tape back in the 80s. But the truth of the matter, in Britain, it was actually more like this. So you've got, you got these two Dorises waiting there for you.
Well, I was lucky because where I lived, we had a video shop called Whirlwind Videos, and it was great. Yeah, and it used to terrify me though, because as you walked in as a kid, they had a life-size cardboard cutout of Freddy Krueger, and they had Hellraiser. And it was absolutely terrifying as a kid going in there. You didn't pass through that section of the VHS aisle. But it was just, I can still now, I've got the smell of how it smelled going in there. And just picking up those cassette covers and, I used to annoy my parents. I'd spend probably an hour and a half before I even picked anything out in that place. It's just
just like today, isn't it? With the
Ron, I agree with you completely. I can still to this day, almost 4 decades later, I can still remember the smell of Bandito video. It's like this awesome plastic smell. I feel bad for the young kids because Netflix is not the same. And did your video stores have the section that was behind the curtain? Because mine did.
Behind the shiny curtain,
My brother and I used to sneak in there, and we got kicked out a few times. But we looked at this stuff is.
But so the thing is, though, I'm assuming I'm older than all of you here. But the first time I went into a video store, it was literally right. You walked in. On the left was VHSs. On the right was beta.
That's
and they
right.
had two desks, left and right, and there was like a guy behind one desk and a guy behind another. It was very rare in those days that you had a middle bit where you can look at the covers and stuff. It was just there on the shelves.
Yeah.
And you went in and you asked for a certain film.
Oh no, we didn't have that. We could browse in my local store. Our local store was called. Get this, if you think yours sounds bad, get this for seediness. Our local very first rental store was called Downtown Video, and they'd got so like in the newsagents, the shelves above a certain height. That's where all the grot was. So you could look up and see Electric Blue 43.
They film their own videos, Dan?
So, what was that, buddy?
Did they film their own videos? I
wouldn't put it past them.
Scenarios where they've got the studio upstairs and then it just goes downstairs.
Wasn't it Peter Kay who said he worked in a video store, and for the adult videos he used to swap and put kids' cartoons in them. So people used to take them home, and then they'd come back about an hour later furious because they got Fantasia or something instead of.
But you see, that happened to me. That actually happened to me and my brother. It was God, what was it? It was a He-Man video. It was either He-Man or Thundercats. I can't remember what it was. We were like 9, and we rented. And it was from Bandito. So Dad's like, okay, you just shut up and go away and watch Thundercats, and we put it in. It was not Thundercats.
What's Lion-O doing?
And,
although, Chris, I'm gathering there could have been a few hoes in there.
But
Dan, you cheeky little monkey.
What you call it? You know what? Right? When everybody learned, so there's periods of that time. So you had the independent video store, and there were like only 2 around my area. Then there was a period. I don't know if you guys remember this, where people learned how to copy tapes. They learned how to copy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know my dad had a device to decode the things that would make you not. I've still got
well, it wasn't. Okay, right. So before the advent of the bug, which we used to call it, we used to put the bug in the video so you couldn't record it. before that, you used to get two machines, you used to connect them from the back, right? And then you used to video, you used to blank tape and video them, and then you know, obviously it was illegal. But I remember, right, my friends got so clever. What they used to do is they used to copy the tape, and then they used to get the screwdriver, unscrew the original tape and their tape, and swap the actual tapes, and take the copy that they
That's
had,
madness.
put it in the thing, and then they would have the original, and they give it back to the.
And I bet the swines didn't even rewind it either, did they?
Why did I do that? That's actually brilliant. No, like a poor sap. Well, that's what we did with the Bandito videos on Friday. We'd rent them, and my dad actually we had 3 VCRs. He recorded everything to beta, and then he had a second beta and a VHS, depending on what we rented, and he could record it. So Total Recall, I watched it many times, but it was always that duplicate. But no, you could actually, there was a magazine, it was called Video Magazine, and there's no way this was legal, but when they Touchstone and Disney started this in around I think 1988, where the video, if it was coming through a output source, it would be scrambled. No, Video Magazine, you could order a descrambler, which I don't know how they got away with this, but my dad ordered it. I remember we're all really excited because they would fade in and out and it would look just dreadful. So my dad got his video thing, you know, we hooked it up. I'm like, does this work? I'm like, it worked. It was brilliant. I miss the old days.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Simple days.
Those magazines at the time, though, as well, you're right, they had the adverts in them, like, you know, 14 pages in, it goes, unscramble your VCR. No one seemed to say, no, that's illegal, right, don't place that ad in the magazine. They just allowed it to happen, didn't they, back then?
John, there was a blur, right? Because basically, if you got a VHS, if you got any kind of recorder, Betamax or VHS, you were allowed to record off TV. Now, in that sense, that was true. Breaking the copyright as well. Especially if you had a cassette tape and you recorded music off your boombox, that was breaking copyright as well. So there was a grey area until the government sorted out what was right and what was wrong and made a law and stuff like that, and then it got worse. So, but those were the days. They were fun days, man.
Great times.
They were fun days. I'm just picturing the kids who, you know, the B2K swapped the tapes for them, so they got the pornos in with the cartoons. I could just see the mum saying to the dad, you know, oh, have you seen what's happened here? You go and give them what for. You go and complain. So the dad would like take the tape, take it back down to the rental shop. Then he'd be confronted with a site like this, and he'd say, oh no, it's okay, you're all right there, love. It's
my dad tripped over the couch. As soon as he realized, I think that they could hear the moaning noises. Like, what? That doesn't sound. What? Yeah.
But didn't you also have in the video shop as well, where they said, you know, when they did bring in the certificates and that, you still walked into the video store and the clerk behind there was watching with the screens up. They were watching like Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that. Anyway,
that was the first time I saw Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I think I was like 6. And they had honestly, nobody cared. They could be playing the naughty adult tapes because you'd have young kids back there, and society was completely different back then. Nobody cared. It was like, okay, go away for 5 hours and just don't get hit by a car. That was the mentality. So you'd have these kids, and they'd be playing naughty movies. They'd be playing, I don't know, like Die Hard. I'm actually that's something else that I associate with Bandito, walking into like the echoey sounds of like guns. And what I actually used to do is I'd put the same thing on both TVs in my house to mimic the sound of it, because they had this playing on multiple TVs.
Really?
Man, kids today, they don't know.
You know what?
They don't know they're even born.
Yeah.
The first film that I ever brought, right, and I swear, right, and it was me and a couple of friends. We put up money to buy it. Was Enter the Dragon.
Oh yeah.
You know how much it cost? £75.
It would have been a lot of money. Yeah.
It was Betamax as well. £75.
75 quid.
That was normal. You could not buy it. There was the exception where there was the exception where if it was a big release, you know, we'd have them in Sears back in the 80s, but the to buy versions, they were garbage. It was cheap tape. A lot of them were extended play. They were terrible. And in the 80s, they didn't even have preview because usually it previewed purchasing. That came in with Blockbuster in the 90s, which is where I got most of my VHSs, although they'd been played 100 times by then. But no, it was, if you wanted to buy an actual rental quality tape, the average going price for either beta or VHS in the 80s in North America was between $80 and $100. I remember very clearly there was Bandito's competitor, which was called Major Video, Star Trek, the original series. And they had them up there, and you could buy them if they wanted to. So you could rent, or you could buy one episode for the bargain price of $79.99. Like
for
you
one
have
episode.
no idea how lucky y'all have it now. And
I think that deserves another one of these. Quite frankly, Terry. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And no, there was something. It was something about building your own video library with. There was a certain pride when you had your multiple VCRs hooked up and you had the decoder and somehow you actually managed to get it working at the proper frequency. There was actually, when I put in my tapes, I'm like, I created this myself. My brain made me do something that's legal. And I'm sure 40 years ago, some sort of statute of limitations is passed now. The technology don't even exist. But there was something, and I'm sure, Ian, you definitely identify with this as well. There was something about, having your really curated collection of tapes that you created yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's probably why everybody that did that are probably diehard physical media collectors.
Yeah,
like those of us here.
Even the various logos that introduced the films and the distributors on VHS, they even became sort of old friends. Every time I see them now, I get the warm, tingly feelings. Everybody,
I remember
definitely
that.
do.
Yeah.
I think they went bankrupt in the 90s too, but no, we're finally. Oh yeah, half an hour in, and we're finally going to talk about.
We're getting there. Okay, so
what? This happens when I'm here.
I knew we should have done an introduction episode to this. So this time we are delving into the worlds of a sci-fi classic to answer a simple question. Really, is Total Recall, originally released in 1990, is Total Recall still worth a watch? We're going to take a trip down memory lane here with the guys again. Another trip. I think we're halfway down there already to revisit this legendary movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. The film made a massive impact on the sci-fi genre. Of course it did at the time, but generally speaking in cinema as well. There was huge anticipation for this film, built up for quite a long time before. There was teaser posters and trailers and all that kind of thing. Hype was really starting to go to the next level. I think part of that, because of the success of Batman the year before, the marketing of that, I don't think Total Recall was quick enough to jump on that. And of course, it being aimed at more older people, this was an 18 certificate. It was a grown-ups film, so they couldn't sell the Happy Meals. But they absolutely started marketing this thing a long time before it was actually released. It starred the big guy Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it was directed by Paul Verhoeven. That they'd wanted to work together for years and years and years. And this film's journey to the screen, you'd think it would have started, for example, with the early success of Blade Runner, which is based on a story by the same writer. We'll probably come to that in a moment. But that wasn't the case at all. People have been trying to option this story for decades, and it was the star power of Arnold Schwarzenegger and the director Paul Verhoeven coming off the back of a huge success with 1987's original RoboCop movie that finally got the wheels in motion on the whole project. I remember back when this came out, I was going to the cinema all the time. The first multiplex had opened by me, and so any chance that I got, I was going to see whatever I could. I was old enough to get into 15s. I wasn't old enough to get into 18s, but you could sort of sneak in anyway. Arnold Schwarzenegger was probably the biggest star on the planet, or close to that. I'd say the mid-80s had belonged to Sylvester Stallone, but the late 80s and the early 90s absolutely belonged to this guy. Several successes in the years in between, starting probably with Conan, working up to The Terminator, huge success, particularly on video. And then there was several films after that, but I'd say Predator was the standout one, directed by John McTiernan, of course. Those were very much the deep hits that led to the arrival of Total Recall I'd say, Ian. You know, he was a star that was in ascendance, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the biggest star in the world. Then again, he probably wasn't, because India had a bigger film industry. But there you go. We won't talk about that. But he was biggest star in. Well, he was a big star. But surprisingly enough, it started off with Dino De Laurentiis, didn't it?
Apparently so.
Yeah, and then they went bust, didn't they?
Yeah. And it was linked. I think they originally wanted Richard Dreyfuss to play the main character, didn't they? I think
you're right.
Other people.
Well, I heard that for years and years and years that Richard Dreyfuss was a shoo-in for that part, and I've always liked the idea because I think he's a fantastic actor, and he's so obviously very physically different to Arnold Schwarzenegger. You think, well, how would that have worked? How could that have worked? Why would that look? But apparently, he wasn't in the frame for very long. Richard Dreyfuss was somebody they talked to quite early. Off the success of Jaws, but the person that actually came closest to being cast earlier was actually Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, Patrick Swayze. Yeah,
that would have been interesting.
But the thing is, though, they wanted Patrick Swayze. They couldn't get him, right? But then obviously the company went bust. But then they looked at the script, because Arnie was the one that brought it to Carolco, and they said, "Well, wait a moment, he's a desk man. No, we've got to change that." So they changed it, because Arnie's to a construction worker. So there you go.
It's somewhat different.
You have to say, in this film, that scene where he's doing the construction work, I mean, he is jacked, isn't he? I mean, those arms are like four trees put into one arm.
I
don't think he was. I don't think he was ever bigger than the size that he was.
They put him next to a fat man, don't they? Just to show, just to say, oh, there you go.
Or back when he was doing bodybuilding, when he was Mr. Universe, that was Arnold at his biggest. He looks like He-Man. But this might be Arnold at his overall bulkiness. You wouldn't want to get into a scrape with Arnold, because he'd break you in half with his pinky finger by this point. But we all loved Arnold. We still love Arnold.
Yeah,
there are lots of actors and actresses that we love in this. Michael Ironside played Richter, who was I suppose he was the henchman, wasn't he? The enforcer of the main big bad guy. So he got to do all the snarling, all the running around through gritted teeth. So that was quite a pantomime character. But Michael Ironside was perfect for it. Sharon Stone played the kind of gangster's mole character. Laurie, who's the wife of Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, or at least we think she is. But this having a kind of almost like a sort of futuristic Bondian feel to it. There is a second girl in it. This is Rachel Ticotin, who played Melina, who's one of the freedom fighters. How do they describe her in the thing? Is it as sleazy? Is that when she got the character breakdown, why don't you play this sleazy freedom fighter?
What was that? Bolstrek, what do you say?
She was ordered by Arnold as brunette, athletic, and sleazy.
That's it.
that scene is in the movie when he's like ordering the recall stuff. That she was computer generated. Although she looks like, she goes from looking like a hideous computer generated early Nintendo nightmare to that. I'm like, they skipped a step there somewhere.
So I work with Michael Ironside, as people know. And what's interesting, when on downtime, when I was on the set with him, he was telling me about the film, and he was saying that he hated it because he had to get into shape, and he hates getting into shape. So for this film, because he knew he was running around, he was in the gym like was it twice a day trying to get into shape and stuff like that. And I said to him, surely it was a great time meeting, Arnie and stuff. Like, he goes, no, the best time was when I kissed Sharon Stone. And I was like, okay, mate, all right. Take a step back now.
Easy tiger.
And I've got to say, Ronnie Cox as well. I was going to say,
amazing.
Dan.
Oh, Captain Jellicoe, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. What a guy.
He's superb in this. He played a similar part was he in RoboCop?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought he was.
Remembered for RoboCop, Total Recall, and Captain Picard's brief replacement season 6.
In fact, a lot of actors from RoboCop was in this. Do you remember that the policeman, when the politician was in the thing, and he goes, right, with the thing, he's in it.
Yeah.
Everyone in RoboCop was in this film.
It's great.
Yeah.
And I just think Ronnie Cox, and he was in Stargate SG-1 as well. And I remember, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but I watched the RoboDoc documentary about RoboCop.
Yeah.
And he talks in there and he says that he was just so happy finally to get to play, a bad guy, because he played good guys before. But clearly he'd had such a blast doing RoboCop. They went, yeah, let's bring him back and have him do it again in Total Recall.
Play basically the same part. Yeah. Now, if it's been a while since you've seen Total Recall, you may need your memory jogging. All of us have watched it again this week. It had been a while for me, but we appreciate we've sort of sprung this on you, haven't we? We want to loosen up the drawers inside the filing cabinets inside your mind, shake off the dust, so you can join in and add your comments and memories there in the live chat on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and on X. We'll come to those in a little while. But here's a quick look back to 1990 and Total Recall.
What would you do if you discovered somebody stole your mind and there was only one way to get it back? Catch Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Get ready for a surprise!
Total Recall.
All that imagery, all that excitement, it shags you out just watching it, doesn't it? But this is the plot, in case you need to be refreshed about that. It says that Doug Quaid, a happily married construction worker living in the year 2084, is haunted by a recurrent dream in which he is living with a woman on Mars. Or don't all women come from Mars? Recall Incorporated. It's just a joke, girls. It's just a joke. Recall Incorporated offer him the chance to live out his dream through a microchip which implants any memory their client desires into their brain. But something goes wrong during the installation of Quaid's memories of a trip to Mars, and soon he lands up on the planet for real, unsure of his true identity and pursued by a gang out for his blood. He teams up with a group of resistance fighters to uncover a mystery which leads to the highest echelons of the planet's government. Total Recall was released 34 years ago, the second most expensive film ever made at the time, and I think it still stands as one of the most popular films that Arnold Schwarzenegger and Paul Verhoeven, the director, ever made. Since its release, Total Recall has been praised for its ambiguous conclusions, its mind-bending ideas, and the simple question of what's real and what is reality, and who are we? What makes up a human being? Very, very deep stuff. And yet it's packaged in the most commercial and crowd-pleasing of ways. Wouldn't you say, John?
Oh, that trailer again, just seeing it a few moments ago, that just gives me goosebumps, because I miss the time when trailers really did excite me. And I really wanted to see it. Because yes, we get trailers now, but they just don't. Maybe it's because I'm getting old and I'm an old git now, but they just don't excite me as much as they used to. Whereas, I remember people talking about it at school and they're going, oh, you seen the new Arnie trailer, and you knew your parents weren't ever going to let you watch it, but there was always that kid at school that had a pirate copy that smuggled it around the classroom. It was great. Good times. Take me back.
And posters too, John. Okay, the one that we've got up on screen at the moment, that's not a painting, but it's not some sort of mass of floating heads either. There's something very stylish about it. There's something very evocative about it, Ian. It doesn't tell a story, but it teases you, makes you want to go and see this film. But all of those movies that Arnie top-lined at that point all had his name in huge letters across the top of the poster, didn't they?
Yeah, well, it's an advantage of Tim having that long name, wasn't it? When you use his surname, just put it on the top of the poster.
Looks great on a quad poster, yeah. I'll get him.
But I was confused because, the poster wasn't very good, actually. It just had that triangle thing. I'm assuming that's the mountain where the alien tech was.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think that's what it meant. But, but yeah, I mean, I didn't think much of the designs for the posters, tell you the truth, but. you know, it is what it is, I guess. That's what I was talking about. Look at the arms.
Yeah. Next, and look at that. Always put a jack man next to a fat man. Works every time. Look.
Hell, man. Hell. This was shot in Mexico, I believe, as well.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, the whole thing was shot in Mexico, apparently, to save on money and stuff. And actually, the places that they visited in Mexico actually dictated the sets as well, so the style could be kept. I think concrete. It was a lot of concrete, wasn't it? In the film.
The architecture in the scenes, the earlier part of the film where we're in futuristic Earth, it has got that kind of dystopian look. I mean, not to the extent that films like Logan's Run are, but it has got that, definitely got that look. Yes, apparently it did film in Mexico City. And the new brutalism, that's the style of architecture, isn't it? So very, very blocky buildings. It's all very concretey, Chris.
It's very brutalist, and I must say the nostalgia is I can't remember his name, but the guy that narrated like every trailer for 10 years.
Yeah,
in a world where things are going not so good, is a man.
Go to McDonald's. Yeah,
man who's lost. I can't even. I could do it if I tried, but blocky buildings. Well. It was brutalist architecture used to mean the future, although it's better than I actually watched both of them last night, Dan. I did a double feature. I watched this and the remake.
Wow.
I like the look of this one. The remake is a CGI nightmare.
Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah. In her, I think her last big role.
Yeah.
I mean, what makes this stand out, I think, from a lot of Schwarzenegger's other films at the time is the fact I wouldn't describe it as intellectual as such, but it has got themes. It has got quite a complicated plot. It's very literate, because it's based on a book, isn't it, by Philip K. Dick? Well, a novella, I think it's called. We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. And Philip K. Dick had died quite young in the early 80s when he was only about 52 or 53. But by this point, several of his various stories and novels were starting to be optioned for film and television. And this one had spent so long in development. But David Cronenberg had written earlier drafts of this script, and he'd been the one that had turned it more into an adventure movie, away from sort of harder sci-fi, and introduced some of the
horror.
Horrific elements into it as well. Yeah, so I think that's probably where it all comes from, the idea of sort of conjoined twins and psychic humanoid people who've got scarred faces and things. That's all comes from Cronenberg, I think, Chris.
Yeah,
okay.
It does. In fact, he was involved with it. He was one of the directors that was linked to it, and he was the one that helped shape the script, and also he did drawings and stuff like that, and they left all that stuff in the screenplay when Van Hoven took over. So yeah, so a lot of his influences in this film. But you know what? Watching it again made me think, right, this film would never be able to be made today, especially the way it's made. The violence in this film is really over the top, isn't it? And,
it is rather.
Really,
it's the RoboCop era. RoboCop, Die Hard. This is when, the late 80s, 1990. But this was that period where you did have those awesome R-rated films, and every kid that I know of watched them when they were a kid, and it didn't actually warp them. But no, that's what I miss about this era, where you did have your Land Before Time and Little Mermaid, and you had your well-made kids movies. And the funny thing about these as well is, even though the movies obviously were not made for kids, they all had toys marketed towards kids. There was a Total Recall line, there was a RoboCop line. But I love the violence in the movie. But I think, going back to what Dan was saying, if Cronenberg would have done this,
it would have been different.
Seen it through to the end, it would have been an interesting movie. But it would have been a very different movie. Cronenberg is very much in the body horror, and his films are generally very surreal. I don't know if you've seen Crimes of the Future, but it's one of the most nutty things I think I've ever watched. That film is a film on like acid mixed with everything else. But what I like about Verhoeven is there's always satire built into all his films, or at least the ones that I've seen. that nobody else has really replicated. You know, you look at RoboCop, you look at the satire, and this sort of commenting on the current state of the world, which this is, you know, more than a century, or takes place almost a century after when.
Well, it fleshed out the world around the characters, didn't it? And it helped embed it for us in a world, in a society that was kind of like ours up to a point, but when we see how people think and relate to one another has changed, that's what sort of freaks us out a little bit, because those ideas, Chris, they're quite unsettling, aren't they? And they kind of stay with you.
Yeah, they do, and and it's funny, and I think it's even more so with the even though it's the lesser of the two, even more so the second film, which is only 12 years old, or the remake, almost rings closer to what we're seeing right now. But I think at this point in 1990, I don't know if this as many people would have predicted this kind of future. There was still some optimism that things were going to get better. Watching this now, like literally 34 years after I watched it, it's like, in many ways, this is our society now. So Verhoeven was right in a lot of his predictions. But he predicted a very dark future in RoboCop, in Total Recall, and my guilty pleasure, which a lot of people, I think a lot of people don't even know he directed it, but Showgirls. No, actually, if you view it as a comedic satire, it actually is. It's a comment on society in 1995, and if you watch it now with
I completely agree with you. I wouldn't say I'm an advocate for that film as such, but I certainly see that he wasn't being necessarily serious about the themes in that either.
Well, he did it with Starship Troopers as well.
Yeah,
and what he did with Total Recall, RoboCop, and Starship Troopers is he also it's almost like a newsreel where, you know, you've got like the little news spots sprinkled throughout the film. And so that's sort of the grand trilogy. Starship Troopers probably being, I like it, but I think it's the lesser of the three of them.
Yeah, I'd agree on that.
It's social commentary, and this is again something that I don't think we would see in modern times, because you're not really allowed to comment on the state of society, even though we can all see what's going on before us. But in so many ways, this predicted our future, although I think our actual future, where we're headed, is, I think, so much worse than any of these films actually predicted. Although he was right in RoboCop, Detroit did turn into the living definition of hell. I know, because I've been lost in Detroit a few times.
Chris, I think coming back to this film, it's been about 10 years since I've seen this, between 8 and 10 years, and a lot has changed in the world since then. A lot's changed in entertainment. And I've always been fond of this movie. I've always liked it. And obviously, over time, you get more nostalgic for a film like this. But this time, I did find, just as you said, a lot of the themes and the way the world is depicted then, and the character of Quaid, where his mind is at, how he's a very small cog in a very big machine at the beginning. All that feels more relatable than ever.
I'd say it's... from his perspective, it's a story of disillusionment. And I think that's where a lot of people, I don't think that was the case back in 1990, but I think that is the case with many, I'd say the majority of people now. It's disillusionment. It's like, okay, this is my life. We don't see anything positive for the future. You know, working dead-end jobs, in the case of many countries, not even being able to afford food.
Well, exactly. This is it, Chris. People have got poorer. I saw something on social media just today where they were talking about Britain as it was in the 90s. So after this film was actually made, and they were saying, Ian, how the average person, you know, if you've got an ordinary life, you could still guarantee you'd be able to go on a holiday once a year. You'd got that time to look forward to. Whereas now, fewer people can afford to do those things, or go to the pub and treat the family to a meal. And it was only when I sat down and thought about it. Yes, you're absolutely right. Having conversations with people, the demands on the average person, whether you're single or married, they do seem to be far greater now, and people seem unhappier now. They've got less release.
It's only because of money and the governments that are trying to fleece everybody out of everything. That's basically.
But Quaid, when we meet Quaid at the start of this film, he's trapped, isn't he, in that menial job. He's obviously minded for other things, and the only way that he can escape is by how he rationalizes. He hasn't got the time or the money to take a holiday, so he thinks, okay, I'll put my money into a product from Recall, and he goes to have these memories implanted in him. So I think, okay, if I can't have the actual experience, at least I can have the memory of it, and that could make me happy for a short period.
The only thing that didn't make any sense, right, in this film, right, and I thought about it today, is when he went to do the Recall thing, and they said, "What kind of woman do you want?" You have to be really honest, and we all know they sleazy. They came up with the picture of the woman that he basically when he was a secret agent, but that doesn't make any sense. How could they come up with that picture? So that's something that didn't make any sense.
I watched an interview earlier with Verhoeven, and he was saying that he deliberately put it into the film, as we know, that the more the film goes on, he seeded more of it, so it makes your mind doubt whether it's a dream or whether it's not a dream. But
that is quite clever.
And he said the reason he did that was because on the first time you watch it, he wanted it to be like, well, okay, we know whether it's reality or not, really. But then as you watch it more and more over the years, you start thinking more about it. And that's why he said that he seeded quite a lot of stuff in. But going back to what you were all saying a few minutes ago, I think you're right about society heading there, because if you look at it now, we're not far off, especially when you've got things like VR headsets that have come along, where people will get to that point and they'll go, well, I can't afford to go to, Hawaii for a holiday, but I'll just log on to my VR headset and get a virtual trip on that. When this came out in 1990, you didn't have that tech, but we're not far off of that now, are we?
I do hope not. I don't hope that doesn't happen. I really do. Yeah.
And we are definitely living in the age of the waifu, where people can have their own wives literally made in Android form. Who would you go with? Would it be Sharon Stone or Rachel Ticotin? Which one would you be there, Ian?
Look, if somebody said to me, if Sharon Stone was in my bed and she said, let's stop dreaming about Mars, I'd be like, yeah, forget about all that, mate. Definitely Sharon Stone, definitely.
Sharon Stone was next to unknown when Basic Instinct came out. As I say, I'd seen her in a Police Academy film, and in King Solomon's Mines, that kind of light Indiana Jones rip-off there with Richard Chamberlain. I loved that film too. But this was the time of the blockbuster. This was the time of excess. Arnold Schwarzenegger himself was almost superhuman, it seemed, any time that he was on screen. And special effects were advancing at such a rate. Every year there was something that we'd never seen before, some massive innovation. Total Recall featured early examples of CGI in the scene at the airport, when the X-rays that we see where Quaid is fighting as a skeleton. Little moments like that. So digital stuff was coming through, but this film balanced the digital with the practical effects, didn't it, John? So it's very much got its own personality, and it feels very authentic in a way that a lot of the films that we tend to sort of think about and romanticize, I think, all these decades on. Now we have such things as the volume and massive amounts of CGI used in current films and TV shows. These are the kind of qualities that we look back on and think, if only films were a bit more like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this film in particular, I mean, when you're talking about the practical effects, some of them aren't in it for long, but I love like Johnny Cabs, the practical effects for that, Yes. And then he goes, what is it? That'll be $23 like that. And he goes, sue me or something like that. And it goes, and it hits the wall.
To kill him, though, it? But great. I was watching a YouTube, and they were comparing both films, this one and the one with Colin Farrell, and they were talking about the fights. Just looking at this picture now, and it's true. They were saying that this fight was more WWF. You hold someone's thing and you break their neck that way and stuff. And then when you look at the latest one, it was all kind of all CGI. It was kind of like shooting and then disguise this shot where he hits somebody and then he shoots someone, whatever. So when you look at both of them,
Yeah.
This was more practical than the latest one, and that fight was very much WWF, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And fucking people and stuff.
I prefer.
Can I? Yeah,
so do I.
definitely. Same. And can I just add, as we're talking about fights in this film, can we show a mark of respect for that poor guy that was just going about his day on the escalators and got hit by about 4,000 rounds as he was a human shield, and then got thrown down the escalator.
Collateral damage. There are lots of sort of very jarring sort of tonal moments with this, but I suppose because of the satire that you were talking about, Chris, it still works because it's still got a kind of a bitterness to it. This isn't a crowd pleasing film in the sense, yeah, you may punch the air when Arnie starts sort of laying on the bad guys and things like that, but it's quite a bleak movie. I think, and yeah, that's the word, cynical. Yes.
Well, I like this kind of cynicism. And again, if you want to compare it to what we would see today, we would see very different things. And I don't want to make this thing devolve into, but we know what kind of things would be in a movie like this today that weren't even in the 2012.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Edition. But this is not how it affects any certain group. This is how it affects all but, well, the 1% of society. This is the lives that, well, a lot of us lead now. And the poor guy on the escalator, I think even that could be a statement. This is the valuelessness of your life. You're just going to be a human shield. But I hadn't watched this. Last time I watched Total Recall was when I got the Blu-ray Steelbook, which would have been about 10 years ago. So I watched that again last night, and again, watching both of them back, it's you can see even in this and the lesser one, there is, it basically, it tells you the future is going to suck. And of course, the future, which is the present now, does suck. But I'd say in some ways we're even, the dependence on smartphones, the dependence on VR, which we are yet to see, but I think it's going to be a big problem in the future.
Yeah.
I think the dependence on technology, I think this almost underestimates the way it would become. And I love some of the old technology. One thing that I love about these movies, which is kind of silly, but I love watching, you've got CRT monitors. That was the future. You've literally got a 1990 model Panasonic TV, which I recognize that's in there. And I think you were also talking about the fight scenes. That was a big thing that struck me between this and the other one. I like practical effects. I like actual effort being put into the film rather than things being generated by a computer and Ian would know this.
Yeah.
The way they cut modern sequences where it's a cut like every 0.5 seconds where it's, it's so fast you can't see what's going on. No, here, for the most part, other than very, very early CG, what's there is what was happening at the time. And even the practical effects, like when he's the fat woman at the immigration terminal or whatever you call it, her thing comes off and you can kind of see it's obviously statue.
We'll talk to that.
Because that wasn't made by a computer. These were made by humans.
One thing I noticed in this, Chris, very much on that level, is that these screens are all portrait. So they're all the way that smartphone screens are now. They're all tall. At the time,
that's what they thought that massive contraption Ironside is standing next to. That's what they thought the smartphone was going to be in 1990. That was, imagine carrying those around people. But yeah, you've got the static image. But no, it did. It predicted the future. You can, we all now carry these devices where we can chat if you want. I did notice one very bad safety feature, which just stuck out to me, which wouldn't happen today, where he's driving his car and you can have the picture and talk to them while you're driving. So you got outside, he's looking at that. I'm like, some of that just stuck out to me. I'm like, yeah, that never would happen. That would be a disaster.
But also another thing, sorry, Ian, go.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you go, I'll stay. I was just going to say, we're talking about tech. I was just saying about the hologram with Sharon Stone playing tennis. Well, you had that, didn't you? You had the Wii, and we've had that technology since then. So that was predicted. Yeah. Sorry.
I was about to say there's two bits that stand out for me. I'm not going to give out any spoilers or talk about a scene that's coming up, but the two bits that stand out to me is the bit where that picture you just showed, the guy with the glasses says that he's something about his wife going with Arnie. It's like, remember that scene? That made me laugh so much.
He says, you say, I wouldn't like it if a guy like Quaid was banging my old lady. And he says, you're saying she enjoys it?
No, I bet she hates it.
The way he says it, though, the way he says it is so funny. It makes me laugh. A second bit that really puzzled. It's just like the scene. I don't know if you remember Back to the Future 2, where he gets the letter out and it's raining. And it's pouring all over the letter. That always bothered me even when I first saw it. I was like, just put it under the umbrella. The second scene that bothers me like that in this film is when he gets the suitcase, he opens it, and then there's all these mice or rats, whatever, in front of him. He doesn't even, they're just sitting there. He doesn't even bother, trying to move them or anything. He just sits there and the mice are running around in front of him. I'm like, whoa, come on.
Well, how would he get rid of? He's a desperate man on the run, Ian. I mean, maybe he just wasn't.
He's Arnold.
The reason why he didn't get rid of them was because he needed to stick the bug in the chocolate thing so that they could chase it, isn't it? That's why he was sitting there looking at the thing and the mice was just in front of him, that kind of thing. But
I felt sorry for that mouse.
Splat.
Animal cruelty, you probably wouldn't see that now either. Yeah. Although, that's one of the things that kind of, I don't hurt the poor mouse. Just leave the animals alone.
It is a very, very brutal film. But if you hurt any animals at all, you don't actually see the rat
fish
die.
Sequence. Oh man,
the fish.
That was the first time that it actually really pissed me off.
Yeah.
But there, Ronnie Cox. There's the sequence where he knocks over the fish tank. And for some reason, this didn't bother me in the past. I don't know. Maybe I've become a softie as I've gotten older. But you see the poor fish gasping for breath, and you could tell that they filmed actual fish. Like, this is horrible.
I wouldn't say I was shocked by that, but I noticed it. I was conscious of the fact they just simply wouldn't do that on screen now.
No, well, it's like if you've ever seen my favorite band is Faith No More. If you've ever seen the end of their video epic, they've got the fish dying at the end. I never liked that, but this is like the epic video on like a grand scale where you've got multiple fish. It's kind of it's weird how you'll see things over the decades, and then as you get older, you notice different things and things hit you in a different way. But yeah, I just noticed the fish and the mouse. I don't know. It's kind of like
I'm pretty sure they saved those fish. Cut. Quick, pick them up. Quick, put them in. Pretty sure they did.
This was filmed in '89. They did not save the fish.
Right.
They didn't care about the fish.
I'd be surprised. I mean, Paul Verhoeven was a very creative director, wasn't he? Full of ideas. He was daring. He'd had a great deal of success with films starring Rutger Hauer in his native language too, hasn't he? They're both from the same country. And I know that Rutger was obviously in Blade Runner, but I think he'd been acting in films in the 70s. Yeah. And Verhoeven had directed several films in his native language and would continue to do so afterwards as well. I think he was. I think that was from the late noughties. He was back to doing that. Not sure what he's doing now, but he's a very creative, very daring filmmaker. I wouldn't describe it as artsy as such, but and whether he's pretentious or not, I couldn't possibly say, but he's definitely eccentric when you see him interviewed, isn't he, John?
Oh yeah, I mean, when you watch the Robo documentary, and he talks about how much he's effing and blinding with, what is it, Peter Weller and some of the other ones as well, the actors, and he will not take any step back on a film that he's directing. He will basically stand his ground, and and he would push the envelope, but we needed it at that time. And again, I still get sad that we don't get films like this anymore, because
I wouldn't describe him as a visionary like Ridley Scott is, but I'd say he's more like Joel Schumacher. He seems to enjoy what he's doing, and I think he's minded towards the audience. I think he makes films and makes choices because he thinks that would be something that would excite the audience or get them to sit up and pay attention. Arnold Schwarzenegger asked for him by name to work on this post RoboCop. I think you can probably see why. They doubtless had a lot of fun making this movie.
yeah,
The thing is, though, with Paul Van Hooven, he was very much into the aesthetic of things. He was very much into the violence of things. The way he sees it and the way Tarantino sees it is that violence it's just another way to express a sequence in a film, and it the idea that violence can breed violence, especially from films, is absolute rubbish. If someone's unhinged, of course they're going to grab a gun and start shooting people like Arnie, pretend they're Arnie. But majority of people know that kind of violence isn't real, and they know not to imitate it in real life. So he was very much
definitely.
We never had the people committing violence saying I'm blaming Quaid from Total Recall. Actually, it's very ironic that society became much like the society that was depicted there at the level of violence. At least if you live on this side of the pond in the US and Canada, it is that bad. And it's actually kind of funny that Hollywood across the board was very sanitized during what is by far the most violent period of my time, which is the future. The present, I should say, the future back then. And one thing that you were saying about Verhoeven is how he liked to push the envelope. He always has a message. He doesn't care about violence, and oddly enough, you'll always see you'll see scenes where you'll say, "I can't believe they put that on video." I think his most "I can't believe they did that" film was Showgirls. If you look at some of the things he actually filmed for that movie, it also has probably some of his most impactful and I think disturbing one in particular scenes of violence.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
it's he wouldn't be you wouldn't be able to make movies even independently, self-financed. You couldn't make a movie like this because the entire planet would be trying to cancel you, which is odd. And it's just the juxtaposition of how the more sanitized Hollywood becomes, the worse society becomes. Because we weren't, at least over here in 1990, well, maybe it depends on where you were, but we weren't a very violent society back then. Kids could still go outside. You could walk down Yonge Street in downtown Toronto and not be worried. Now it's the exact opposite. Like cities now have no-go zones where even the police won't go in because they're so violent. So again, maybe we'll call him Nostradamus. He predicted so much of how things were going to go wrong. But this is a director, and you don't see this anymore, except for maybe Nolan in terms of, although not really in terms of violence, but in terms of his films are out there, but they're maybe Tarantino, but they have the.
Also, sexuality was a big thing where he comes from. Do you know what I mean? So in the films where he comes from, nobody will think anything if they have a scene where a woman comes out of a shower and she takes off her towel and then she puts completely starkers and puts a shirt on and whatever, and then continues to that scene. So he brought some of that into it. If you look at he went too far in what is it? The Invisible Man film. I can't remember what that one's called. But in this, with the woman with the free boobs,
the Hollow Man.
Was that it?
Yeah, Hollow Man. But in this film, with the woman with free boobs and stuff like that would never be allowed today. But he thought nothing of it because that's the culture that he came from. Do you know
in
what
Holland?
I mean?
Just
bringing it to America. So there you go. Yeah.
And another thing. Sorry, Dan. I was just going to say another thing that he predicted as well is when you get to Mars, they say about no smoking. So it's a no smoking area. So he put that in as well, which is, now.
But you have, I think another thing, and I think it's a good point of comparison between the two films because they follow very similar beats, but they're very different. In 1990, the post-apocalyptic hell is Mars. In 2012, that version of the film, there is no Mars. It takes place on Earth.
Yeah.
A lot of the beats are very similar, but the story itself is different. In that one, there's only 2 surviving areas on Earth. You've got Great Britain and you've got the colony, which is Australia. And in the second film, Australia takes the place of Mars, where it's this post-apocalyptic hellscape, where it's closer, where it's like the danger is not going to come from something outside of Earth. The danger itself is within Earth, which I think even though we're not really talking about the 2012 film, which is not very well regarded at all, but I
haven't seen it since it came out. No.
I've only seen it twice when it came out and came last night, but that's one of the things that I kind of liked about the second film. It's like, we don't need to go externally for things to go to hell. Things will go to hell right here on Earth. But
in fact, the themes actually do make more sense for it to remain on Earth. I haven't read Philip K. Dick's original story, but I would imagine that the themes were what was driving his story completely, because obviously he was a proper novelist, wasn't he? He wasn't a screenwriter. He was thinking very much about an intimate relationship between the reader and the author. But every time I watch this movie, and it's been a while since I've seen it, every time I watch this film, I'm always swept up in it right from the get-go. I found it gripping this time. I think it's divided up into, actually, I was going to say 3 acts, but I'd actually say it's kind of got 2 halves. There's the stuff that's on the Earth, and then there's the stuff on Mars. And I was gripped in the beginning. You could relate to Quaid, despite the fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger was and is a man mountain. I think he acquits himself well enough to sell us on the idea of who he is, who he thinks he is, and the confusion that he's living with, that duality. I think it's initially very good. But what hit me watching it again this time, and this is a film that I am fond of, but what hit me watching it again this time was how once he gets to Mars, everything seems to... The world that's gradually expanding in the first half of the film, the environment, the world that he's living in, the people he meets, the places he goes to, the danger that he finds himself in, all of that seems to get compacted down. And the film seems smaller, somehow, more intimate, and a little bit more, and this is despite all the special effects and the various mutants that we see on screen, and some of the great action set pieces, it just all feels a little bit of a runaround for a little while. And I always get bored at around the same place. And I think the reason that could be is because that's when the drama elements really start to come to the fore about who is Quaid and who was Hauser, who was the man he used to be, and him confronting the fact that he doesn't like the man that he used to be, and he preferred to carry on being Quaid. Thank you very much. I think that all of that hinges on the lead actor's ability to convince you of both of those parts, and to convince you of a confusion and of a decision that he has to make. And although Schwarzenegger was a movie star, he's a very limited actor, and I think that's where the film starts to fall down, because at that moment, when all of that stuff comes to the foreground, you need a proper actor who's able to convey that with material which is, that's very minimal, isn't it? There's not that much there on the page, but a good actor like Richard Dreyfuss, and I hate to say it, Patrick Swayze could have probably got more out of it. So it's very frustrating watch this, because I want to love it. I love the memory of Total Recall and certain sequences, like the scene at the airport where he's disguised as the great big fat woman. It's wonderful, wonderful stuff, and some of the practical effects. It's all lovely to see back on screen, and the wackiness of it. I want to endorse this film 100%. But every time I watch it, it sinks for me at exactly the same place.
Yeah, but then once they got Arnie, once Arnie was responsible for getting this film off the ground, became an Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle. And if it was somebody else, yes, you're absolutely right. If it was Patrick Swayze, he would have had more gravitas to
he just can't sell me on it.
But Arnie's not, as you said, he's not an actor, is he? He's kind of, well, he is an actor, but he's not. He can't reach those depths. Sorry, Bostwick, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just saying. No, Schwarzenegger was a brand at the time. Like
Yeah.
we didn't talk about. Oh, did you see the new Verhoeven movie or the total?
No.
It's
Yeah.
like you had at this point. It very much was. Arnold was so big, and there is nobody in modern Hollywood that reaches that level in modern times.
Yeah.
It wasn't the new Predator movie. It was the new Schwarzenegger movie. Even Kindergarten Cop was the new Schwarzenegger movie, which they came out the same year. Maybe Terminator 2 was big enough where it was slightly different. There was and I just wanted to say, who was it I mentioned? Somebody said they were the only one that liked Showgirls. Steph. No, actually, no. I like that movie. I'm on record. I own the 4K, and I make fun of me. I don't care. But no,
I'll have to watch it again.
But I know the point I was going to make. This is another difference between the first and the 2012, because 2012, it does have its strengths. Colin Firth actually is capable of portraying that emotion that Arnold, just being Arnold, couldn't back in 1990, which is why I think it has its problems. It's not a good movie at all, but I do recommend, to get the full picture of Total Recall, it is actually worth revisiting that 2012 movie. But I think, Arnold, and I don't think it's controversial to say it, Arnold is not a great actor. That's not why he's a great action star, but he's not a great actor. Yeah. And that's why it's worth watching 2012, because those just emotions that Arnold, bless him, just is not capable of putting forth on screen are in the second. Although, oddly enough, Dan, if you've ever watched the film Maggie, which is
I haven't. That's a zombie movie?
Yeah, from about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's actually, what's notable about that is it's probably Arnold's best performance. And he actually does pull off actual emotion, actual acting in that movie, which, and that was 2014, 2015.
He does a bit. I think a lot of people exaggerate his performance in that. He does a bit, and also, I disagree with you. Colin Firth was terrible. I didn't feel anything for any of those characters.
I didn't originally, but there are some scenes when I was watching it yesterday. Like, I hated it the first time I saw it, but I think it's maybe because I watched the two movies back to back.
Yeah.
Where I think one of the frustrations I had was exactly what Dan was saying, where it does trail off in that second part of the movie. And when I
didn't think so. I totally disagree. I didn't think so. The second half of the movie was the roller coaster ride that we all wanted when we went into the cinema. That's what it gave us.
But it all takes place on what looks like the set of Deep Space Nine.
Or a set of a Star Trek movie.
That's what it was.
I don't know. Maybe, and I'm fully willing to admit that this is my view, and I can see why people would see it otherwise. But every time I watch this movie, I'm just like Dan, where I do start to trail off at the second. As soon as they get to Mars, for me, it's always trailed off a little bit, and it's maybe this seeing the state of Earth in the first half.
That's much more interesting.
So riveting. And then as soon as we get to Mars, but it was exactly what Dan said when I was watching it last night. I'm like, that there is a big question here. Is this actually happening?
They did that better than the Colin Firth one in this one.
I think it's because it's so distinctive with the production design. I think what saves it from ultimately collapsing completely is the fact that everything else that's supporting Schwarzenegger is really very strong. All of the supporting cast are great. Verhoeven knows exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it. And all the production design looks like it belongs of itself. It's a completely realized version of the future and even of Mars. Even though Mars looks slightly less inspiring, it still feels like a place. It just feels like a very, very small place. The initial budget for this film was 30 million. It ballooned to 65 million, which made it the second most expensive film ever at that time, after Rambo 3, believe it or not. It took 260 million at the box office, though, so I think we can safely say that it was a pretty big hit. They were probably very pleased with that.
That's a pre 2021 Marvel movie in modern times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the fact as well that contraptions in this, such as the big chair, it's so the beauty of it is that it's so simple. You can imagine that machine does exactly what they say it does. If it was a visor or something very elaborate, if he was lowered into some sort of chamber full of water with various sort of electrodes running all over him, like in that Zack Snyder movie from earlier on in the year, Rebel Moon or something like that, you think, oh, this is just a lot of hocus pocus. But with this, because we can all imagine going to the dentist, sitting in a dentist chair, it's just enough, just close enough to our world and something that we could feasibly do. I think that works really, really beautifully.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, with the 2012 movie, I think for me, if I'm being honest, I was biased to the original 1990 movie when I watched 2012 purely because I love the 1990 movie so much. And I was like, well, I don't want a remake. And I remember this at the time. And I remember coming out and thinking, going in thinking, I'm not going to enjoy it as much as the original. And that was part of my problem with it. But then I did go through that movie and think, no, it was a bit of a stinker for me. But from what Chris was saying, I will watch it again because I watched 1990 earlier today. I watch this one about 3 times a year. I love it so much. But
it has to
I'll
be
check it out.
Well, I think, John, if you watch it in a certain mindset, and I think, and maybe if I watch it again, maybe I won't, who knows, but I think my mindset was watching it right after 1990, and that second part, and just Arnold being Arnold was something that did irk me a little bit, where he's just, and again, it's an agree to disagree thing, but Arnold just doesn't do emotions well.
Looking at sci-fi movies of the 21st century, just try to bring it back to the original film. Looking at sci-fi films of the 21st century, a great deal of them look very, very similar because the same special effects houses, for example, do a lot of the special effects. They tend to hit similar beats. Whereas when you look at a film like this, even if it does fall somewhat short or not tick a couple of boxes, when it's idiosyncratic, when it's got its own flavour, in the case of this movie, it's just as much down to Jerry Goldsmith's incredible music, right from the very beginning, from the opening titles of it. That when you see the lettering, the type looming over you like that, even that sets the tone, and the music is fantastic all the way through. So even if some elements and some people aren't pulling their weight, can't quite convince you, all of that is still there to keep the momentum up and to keep you engaged with the film. I think the last third is a little more successful and more promising, more interesting, the stuff to do with alien technology left on Mars and that giant reactor. Unfortunately, we don't really spend as much time on that as I think we should, because there's people who need kicking in the head, which was off. And I love all this stuff. I love seeing the two girls go at it in this movie. I think it's a great little action scene. In fact, probably could have done with a little bit more of that. But yeah, I'd like to have seen a bit more of the alien stuff too.
The reason why this film is better than the remake, and it's a good film in my opinion, is because it did what it said on the tin. It's an action sci-fi, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was the biggest star at the time. I didn't feel I was bored when I got to the second half of the movie. I thought the second half of the movie was quite interesting, to tell you the truth. And also, it had that wonderful scene when a guy comes and knocks at the door and he says, "You're still at recall." Do you know what I mean? Take the
wonderful.
pill and stuff. That's a great scene.
But again, he can't quite sell us on it. Sharon Stone's brilliant in it, and so's the other guy, and he's the weak link.
All right, but he didn't have to do much acting in that sequence.
That's true.
Did he? And he did pull it off quite well, because when the guy was convincing him, suddenly Arnie was like thinking about it and thinking about maybe this guy's right, until he saw the little sweat thing on his head.
Do you know what I love about that scene more than anything is when he does shoot him and it's just his eyes roll back. It's great. I love it.
I think the whole film is quite look. All right, let's think about it. We all think about nostalgia, all think about when we saw it and stuff like that. But divorcing it, if you look at it logically, the film gives you what is expected.
I'm not suggesting it's. I'm not suggesting it's a bad film at all.
No, I'm not saying you are.
Actually, I love Total Recall. It's just sort of.
I love this. I do love this film as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
As I've gotten older and as I become more critical, and this is with every movie, even movies I love, like the first 6 Star Trek movies, bar the terrible one, which would be the 5th. Sort of now as I have done media criticism, which obviously I didn't really do as a kid, but things stick out to you, and
look at that.
And you watch them for nostalgia, but I think also we now watch them as we're older. We watch them with the critical eye, and we do notice things that we didn't notice before that will stick out to us. But no, this is a classic. I love this movie. I think 34 years later, I still think it's just as awesome as when I bootlegged my beta copy from Banditos. And I'm glad we could still revisit movies like this, because they don't make them anymore, but we do have everything from that era. Actually, it's kind of funny. There's, as I talk about, say 2010 to 2015 being a very distinctive era in film, I'd say there's a period from maybe 1987 to probably 1991, which is also very distinctive. You can almost automatically, when you see a movie, it's like you can tell it was made during that period. Although the things that make that 87 to 91 period, I'd say they're positives, whereas the things that say 2010 to 2015 that make a movie identifiable from that period are very negative. But it's like
that scene. Sorry, that scene made me laugh.
He's like, random violence.
You think this is the real me? It is.
Oh, I stood up my coffee watching that. It's
this has to be.
See you at the party, Richter.
This has to be one of the most quotable films of Arnie's career. I mean, there are certain lines we all associate with him, particularly "I'll be back," which became a sort of catchphrase over several films. But as regards a film in itself, this script is littered with that kind of stuff, and I think it's largely due to because it's got a kinship. RoboCop's the same, Starship Troopers to a lesser extent. I think it's very much of a Hoven thing rather than an Arnie thing. They all seem to be having so much fun with it as well. Michael Ironside would go on to play this character again several times too, not least of all in Highlander 2, I think, which was 2 years after this.
My favourite quote, though, in this film, it always has been since I was a kid, is, "Hey, Benny, screw you."
No, it has laugh out loud moments. Like it's an unintentional comedy, or maybe it was, but it's an unintentional comedy, but in a good way, where it's like it doesn't really take. Hello.
Consider that a divorce.
Didn't realise you were so kinky.
Right, you know what, right? You know what, right? This film, right, is it's kind of it's very much comic book. Because do you know the bit where the thing was smashing through the wall and Arnie was trying to drill that thing? He got hit here and here, and blood was spurting out, and his girlfriend got hit. And the next scene, they're okay.
Yeah, and so it's like Ronnie Cox. He takes 2 shots to the arm at the end, and he's still holding on to the thing. But when I was a kid, I was just going to say as well, when I was a kid, in my mind, I just had it in my mind as a kid that Running Man and Total Recall were in the same universe, but it was an earlier version because it was like dystopian future, wasn't it? So
I mean, some of the model making in this film was absolutely amazing. You know that the red planet that was all made on a huge soundstage.
Amazing,
really?
I watched the making of special effects, and someone asked, well, what did he do with all that? And they said what they did was they got this truck and they lifted it in the air and they dumped it on the floor and destroyed all of it. It was fantastic. They loved destroying all of it because it was such a pain in the ass to shoot, they were saying. But so I mean, all of it, even this sequence is all model making, huge models, like really, really big stuff. So a lot of money this film cost.
Like Dan showed the shot of the ship landing on Mars. That's just incredible. And the train going along as well. You know, it's world building, isn't it? They were geniuses.
Is coming back to a film like Total Recall after 34 years is a long stretch of time. And this isn't up there as regards cultural footprint. It's not up there with RoboCop or even the Terminator. But amongst people of our age, it's definitely left a mark. It's the kind of film where people mention it, you smile. But is this worth introducing to people, younger people who haven't seen it? Has it got something that's timeless about it, or is its appeal very much anchored to 1990, to the late 80s, the early 90s, and that precise balancing point, not just in Schwarzenegger's career, but in genre movie making completely?
I would half agree with you, Dan. I would say Terminator 2 is nothing from that decade even come like that's
incredible
one of the most
film.
defining films in movie history. So I'd say it's definitely not as well known as Terminator 2 because nothing from this era nothing became as iconic until probably Titanic, also James Cameron. Which was 1997. But I would disagree with you on the RoboCop thing. I think in terms of the way they were viewed at the time, in terms of the way we view them now, I think RoboCop and Total Recall, I think they really are equals. Everybody over a certain age knows what we're saying when we say RoboCop. I think ideally they also know the same when we're talking about Total Recall. I'd say the impact of both films were equal, and Total Recall, we never, we didn't have any sequels. There was a remake, but RoboCop goes downhill over the years. You have the second one, which is still good. You have the third one, which is and then you have that train wreck of a G-rated TV series. The less said about that, the better.
So becoming a franchise was what kind of marred its legacy a touch?
Total Recall? No, I'd say
RoboCop.
It did. It diminishes the first movie, whereas
with hindsight, I think you're probably right.
Total Recall had a TV show as well, though.
Yeah, it did. Didn't do well, did it?
Oh wait, Total Recall.
Was that Sci-Fi Channel? Was that? Yeah.
Yes, there was a Total Recall TV show several years later. It's called Total Recall 2070 Machine Dreams,
where that was horrible. Okay, I completely forgotten about that.
It was cheap and cheerful stuff. Allegedly, this was obviously during the expansion of cable television, not just in America but in Britain too. So this made its way to British screens. And what they did is they went back to the original Philip K. Dick story, as well as other works of the same author, and try to incorporate them all into one world and kind of flesh out the idea and the themes of Total Recall and identity, I suppose, and of memory and of desire and humanity and duality. But unfortunately, the production values and the acting were really quite bad. And so it was difficult.
Literally, I had completely forgotten about that until you mentioned it. Well, this is what, late 90s or mid 90s?
It was the late 90s. It was the late 90s, yeah.
So at least you had almost a decade before you wrecked it. But the RoboCop TV series is still like, how do you make a G-rated RoboCop? Well, they found a way, and dear God.
Well, it's like what they tried to do with Terminator 3, wasn't it? They made that, what was it, a PG or a 12? And it was
back in 2003, 2004, around that time.
And when Arnie walks out with the Elton John glasses on, and you're like, they've missed the whole trick of this, haven't they? Straight away.
But did you know?
I don't hate it, but you could definitely tell it wasn't directed by Cameron.
No, obviously. But did you know that they suffered the same thing that the crew in the car suffered on Raiders of the Lost Ark with food poisoning? The crew
I did read something about that over in Mexico.
Yeah, and Paul Van Hooven, is it how you pronounce his name?
Verhoeven.
Van Hoven. He had to be taken to hospital because he was suffering so bad. Yeah, he had to be taken to hospital. So, and Arnie was the only one because he had his own chef and he had his food driven in. So Arnie never suffered for anything. Everybody else was suffering. So there you go.
No wonder he was smiling.
Yeah.
It's too bad there's that iconic scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark where Harrison Ford was really sick and he was running to the toilet every 2 minutes, And it's the shooting scene with the dude there. He just takes out his gun and shoots him.
Shoots him,
That wasn't planned. That was Harrison Ford saying, "This is all no, just bang, okay, we're done." Back to the bathroom.
6 pages torn out of the script.
Yep.
6 pages.
In light of the fact that I've got my reservations about this, and that every single time I watch it, I always kind of run aground with it at a very particular place, and I have to, sort of think, oh, okay, just go with it. So I can stay with it. Despite all of that, I personally still would recommend that people either go back to this if you haven't seen it for a long time. I still think there's a lot in its gift. I think it's still a lot of fun, and there's a huge amount of nostalgia. But I also think, as somebody to come back to it when you're later in life, you'll get a little bit more out of the themes of it too. I think that content does survive intact underneath all the fun, all the kicking and the punching, and all the beads of sweat and all that jazz. It's all still there. But I also think, would I show it to somebody who was younger, who's used to modern films? I think I probably would. I think that they would find something to enjoy in it too. What about you? What about you, John? I mean, you said this is a favorite film of yours, so is that a no-brainer, or is it something you keep to yourself? You think, I'm not going to show this to anybody else because it's my film and I love this film and I don't want anybody else taking the piss.
I think for me, I will always show this to people, and people who know me know that this is one of my favorite films. And the thing is, I'm a big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan, and it's because I can enjoy all his movies, but I can just switch off and I can relax to them. They are just great fun. But this film, I never get tired of it. It's so good. And I'm at a point in my life now where the movies have become so poor of late, I'm looking back a lot more. And I'm grateful for what I had in my youth.
You know what, right?
And I never get tired of it.
I want to talk about the action in this film. That watching it recently, I watched it 2 weeks ago, right? The action is so funny in this film, but also it's exhilarating as well. The bit that always makes me laugh is the little blonde girl. When they all come in and start shooting everybody.
Oh,
and they hold that guy with the glasses. She slams him. That's so funny.
Yeah. She's wonderful. I mean, they're all wonderful. All of the side characters are really, even the ones that don't really say much are great, are really memorable because they seem to be playing the parts with conviction. They're taking it seriously, or at least they're all acting on the same level. So it convinces you that it's a real place and they're a real community.
That scene, though, is great. I love it because it just becomes carnage all of a sudden, doesn't it? You see people just being blown away everywhere.
What's interesting is that what the director does, he introduced to someone, she has a couple of lines, the girl with the 3 boobs. And she gets wasted, she gets shot in the back. You know what I mean? So a lot of people got shot in that sequence. It's quite fun.
But Ian, you said about the little blonde girl.
Yeah,
I love it when Arnie first turns up, Quaid first turns up, and he's walking off, and she says to what's her name? She goes, "If you need a hand with this one, just holler." Yeah.
It is, as I said, it is. It's I don't know who's the guy with the cracked face, and he immediately doesn't like Arnie when he first meets him.
Tony, is it Tony?
Tony. He gets shot in the arm, whatever. When all the air's coming out, he's fine. He's walking up. He's all right. He's not bleeding anymore.
Where do you sit with this, Chris? Is this a film that you would recommend people go back to? Is it worth a rewatch?
Yes. And I would, I think, even though the young generation can't really watch much past 1 minute TikTok video, anybody that is willing to give it a chance, entertainment now across the board sucks. Even if it doesn't have a message in it, it sucks. Like I'm at that point where everything I watch now is 2015 and earlier, prior to 2015. Most of what I watch now is from the 20th century. I can't. You'll have the rare one, like maybe X and Pearl, which is actually good, but those are the exceptions. Also, I think that's why 2012 movies are nowhere near as bad as what we're seeing now. So I think that will surprise you as well. I'm like, it doesn't have the problems 12 years ago. It was considered bad then. Now this would be considered good. But if you're willing to give it a chance and look past the effects, which actually I like the effects.
Same.
I also, one thing that I love about older movies is I love the look of film, 35 millimeter film, celluloid. I'm sure Ian would agree with me. I hate the sterilized look of modern digital films. I find it instantly just boring. It's got a certain aesthetic to it that's artistic, and I think it elevates it. I love film grain. A lot of people would disagree with me, but I love the look of film grain. I love practical effects. I don't care if they don't look as realistic. I find they're almost less uncanny valley than CGI garbage that we're being thrown at us now. As I watch it, I can okay, look at that. Just as an example.
Genius.
Now that would have been just a CGI thing rendered by a computer. Think of the hours that went in to make that, to put that on screen. Aside from very minimal CGI elements, everything that you're seeing here was made by human hands. And I would challenge, say, to a Zoomer, maybe Generation Alpha might be a bit young, although I'd still, but my nephews are alphas, and I have no problem showing them this kind of stuff, and they think it's awesome. I would say to a modern person who's used to the dreck from streaming services or the garbage pumped out by Hollywood, show them this. Show them RoboCop. Show them Terminator 2. That will still blow most people's minds away. Like you had genuine creativity. You had scripts that were compelling.
Craftspeople all working together.
The reason why it works, though, Bostrek, is because there are flaws in model making. There are flaws like that. There are flaws in that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I give you an example, right? The new Alien film that's coming out, right? If you've seen the trailer, there's a shot where the ship is flying to a bigger ship, and in the background you have Saturn, and you have the rings, and it all looks so beautiful, right? It looks like it's incredibly beautiful. But when you make models, and you have to paint them, and you have to shoot them, there are errors in it. Like you can tell something is small or something's big or whatever and stuff like that. And that's what pulls you in. The CGI thing doesn't pull you in because immediately when you see something like that, you know things like that is not real. And look at that model. Look how big that freaking model
is.
That is amazing,
how many
right?
hundreds of hours of work.
Because there's errors in there.
It's hard.
You know?
Well, I think Ian and Dan and John, well, everybody, I think one thing that's unique about this film, and many films of the time, but especially this one, that you would not see now, because now everything has to be spoon-fed to you. Everything has to be explained. One thing that I love about this film, and I'm sure the three of you would probably agree with me as well, is there's a question at the end. It's deliberately left vague.
Yep.
Does this actually is this all part of the simulation, or did this actually happen? Since the first time I've watched it, I've always been on the side of this is a simulation, because if you look at it, this is exactly what Quaid orders at Recall, but you don't know.
Yeah,
no,
and Hero has said it never will be explained.
Yeah,
same as you, Chris. I mean, I look at it and I always thought it's a simulation, because the way it ends and the light coming in, is almost like him waking up from the dream.
Almost
but I love the fact, and I can go back on it several times, and I always have that conversation with myself, and I think about that when I'm watching the film. I never get tired of that. And again, these days you wouldn't have that element. They just wouldn't put the care in to have that. Is it a dream or isn't it a dream element in it? In my opinion, exactly.
They wouldn't even, I don't even think they'd even try to make something like this now, because everything now is written for the lowest common denominator. They're like, okay, everything has to be aimed at everybody who has a minimum of a grade 1 education. Oh, hello. But they were in 1990. This film, like, it was R-rated. It was just that alone. It was not made for everyone. It's made for a specific audience. Yes, we're all distracted by the same thing. Those look like very good burgers.
Nice baps. Yes. So, yes, we have been reviewing the 1990 classic Total Recall here. You've heard our verdicts. We're going to head over to the live chat now. Yes, so people have been watching and listening to us ramble on about all this across YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and on X too. Thank you, everybody. And they've been dropping comments as well. So let's go and find out what they've got to say about all of this nonsense. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the show. This fabulous trip back to 1990 and Total Recall starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. We've got lots of familiar names and faces there in the live chat, including Lord Thoth. Hail to Lord Thoth, and thanks for being here. Adrian James is here too. Hello there. We've got lots of hello there's. Retro Doc Gary Akers is in there too. He's in there, but he's getting down to our theme music. And we've got Michael Q as well, who says that I say Arnold Schwarzenegger is the king of action movies. He absolutely was in 1990.
Yeah, he was. You know what? I'm grateful for Arnold Schwarzenegger because a lot of the films that I watched during that time featured him, and I enjoyed most of them. So hats off to him if I had one. Yeah.
Yeah. Michael Q says, I've seen the remake of the film and it's bad but good. But there's a few people talking about the remake as well. We'll have to come to the remake another day. Yeah. But we have, what else have we got? Michael Q also says, hello, Chris. Hello, Bowles Trek. I'm a big fan of your work. Well done, says. There's another one for the fan club there, buddy.
Well, thank you, my friend.
Yeah.
Adrian James. You can stay. Adrian James, he says, I remember the days when we used to rent or buy VHS tapes.
Yeah.
The rattle of the tape, the familiar rattle.
Fantastic.
Rent or buy. And says, I used to rent out movies like Return of the Jedi and Aliens. Oh, didn't we all?
Yep.
I actually had anybody remember the Selectavision CEDs? That's where I owned most of my movies the first time.
No.
CDs.
RCA Selectavision. You had them in the UK, but they were they completely bombed here, but they were a little bit more popular. Basically, a big disc that you would put in a machine.
Oh,
the movie was on vinyl.
Yeah.
That
was
okay.
What was that called? That was we call it different here.
Laser electronic disc.
You're talking about laser discs. We had here.
No, it wasn't Laserdisc. It had a stylus. It was.
Vinyl. No, this is all new. You're going to have to send me a picture of that later on, mate. I've never seen that.
We're going to do a stream about that, Dan. But when he brought that up, that's actually how I got my first Star Wars movies. It was terrible.
Cool.
They were unwatchable. They blew up. It would eat your disc. If you touched the disc, it would never play again. If you looked at it the wrong way.
I've missed this so much because this is how these streams always go. We start with it. We're going to talk about this, but then we get into old bits of tech. We get to old shops and all manner of things. It's fabulous stuff, mate. Daryl Joyce says Poltergeist has got its knockers. Daryl Joyce, the fantastic illustrator and movie fan, movie aficionado. Good to have you there in the live chat with us on YouTube. And it reminds us that the film opens with practical effects at their height, courtesy of the special effects guy Rob Bottin was his name. A very unusual name, but you'd recognise the name. Here he is. So here he is at work there. That's Rob with the with the facial hair. They've both got facial hair, but they look like extra Bee Gees, don't they? That they're having in spare in case a couple of other Bee Gees went down. But that's Rob, I believe on the left.
Very serious work. He was the man behind the Creatures in the Thing. He's done a lot of stuff. He's a legend as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Soundman Dualaman Soundman says, yes, my bro was a black belt in karate in 1982. I was forced to watch all of Bruce Lee's films on VHS. I loved them. Total Recall was ace. I will add about TNT. We've got so people are comparing notes about VHS memories as well. Good evening, all, says Peter Harrington. Hi, Peter. If you're still kicking around there, good to see you too. The Timescales says it was easy to open a VHS case with the 4 Phillips head screws. So
Yes.
another one went in on the tech there, just like you're describing it.
You couldn't touch the tapes though. You had to tighten the tapes, and you had to pull it out very carefully, then place it on the ground, and you had to pull the other one out very carefully and put it in, and make sure the tape had gone through the little spool thing. And
Surgical.
Then screw it back. It was very surgical. But
I never did your idea, although I kind of wish I did. I saved some tapes like that. Where there's nothing wrong with the tape, but the mechanism inside the case was buggered. The little spools.
But hold on, right? So when they got wind of it, they put that silver magnetic strip on the case so you couldn't open it.
Oh, is that what those were for?
Yeah.
I've never known.
Right, so that was before they put the bug on the actual tape itself. So they used to reinforce it, didn't they? Then they put the bug on.
Never realised. Peter Harrington says Total Recall was a cracking movie. Crack open the plastic from this cracking movie. Vanessa Law says, I do love this movie. Adrian James says, I was 20 when this one came out. I was 15. No, I wasn't. I was 16 when this movie was released. How about you, John?
Oh, I was probably about 10, I think, top of my head.
Younger.
Yeah, I was a nipper.
I got my math wrong. I was 12.
Vanessa says, I always found Logan's Run kind of boring. Oh, no.
No. That is
love
It is
that.
boring.
Are you talking about the series or are you talking about the movie?
The movie.
Okay, we got it. Okay, Dan, you're doing a stream on Logan's Run.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's going. The list is back
Gauntlet's thrown
open
down.
on suggestions. Yes, absolutely. Adrian James says, I'm good, thanks. It's been raining here in Wolverhampton. I was in Wolverhampton yesterday and it was raining. I'm back in Wolverhampton again tomorrow, I think. It'll almost certainly be raining again.
It's almost 40 here now. With Humidex, we're over 40 now.
Really?
Yeah, I got to take Sky out after this, and her poor little paws are gonna. Yeah, I think we're gonna go in the grass because it's literally too hot for her to walk on the paws.
Blimey, yeah.
You touch grass, mate. Go on, touch it. Yeah.
We were looking at the practical effects and the fabulous cab driver in this movie, and Peter Harrington says that the driverless cars that are featured in the film are almost here now. I bet we don't get friendly, smiley drivers.
No, we're not. No, that is the end of the. That is a terrible idea. Just as bad as the flying cars, and this is why this has never happened. Because if your current car breaks down, like mine did yesterday, it was another very angry story, which is why it's being sent to good pastures next week. But the worst thing that happens is if your car breaks down, you're stuck on the side of the road. You got a flying car, oh, you're dead. Oh, okay, just crash. Same thing with driverless cars. No.
I just wouldn't trust it. I just go off a ravine or something like that, while you're trying to have a nap. You just don't know, do you? Go down a hill. No,
they
sorry.
can program it, can't they?
I want to look at this comment we've got here. I want to look at this comment we've got here from Steph Coburn watching on X. Hi, Steph. And he says, it's already happening. For those unable at present to afford to learn to sail, let alone own a boat, there are now professional courses utilising VR headset simulations realistic enough to confer real-world ability.
Yeah,
I didn't know about that.
No, I said to him in the chat, I didn't know about that either. So, it's further along than we thought then.
Oh, no,
it is.
Yeah. I've seen it. It is that far along. And I think everybody else here will agree with me. I think with all of us, there comes a time in life when you get to a certain age where, like, when it comes out with fancy new technologies, it's like, I'm done. Like the boomers, like I look at my dad's generation. DVD was the fanciest they ever got. They never got onto streaming.
No. But
VR
also,
headsets are not for me. I'm
sympathize.
also I'm not even a social media addict aside from my 2 Twitter accounts and the YouTube channel. I don't do social media. I think, Dan and Ian, I think I used to have you on my Facebook account back when.
Yeah.
I don't do that anymore. I'm like, no, I've reached that point where it's like, no, I will not do VR. I don't care what you push on
But
me.
didn't Gorman do VR in
Who?
Alien?
Did who do VR?
They asked Gorman. They said, "So how many drops have you been on?" And he goes, "Like 20 simulated." So there you go. So even in the aliens world, even in the
Lord,
aliens
Thoth,
world,
Lord
And time
Thoth
clock.
says, Lord Thoth says the 80s gave us so much classic sci-fi and fantasy that will never be equaled. I think you're probably right. Peter Harrington reminds me of another fantastic scene. I'd forgotten about this. So pulling the device out from his nose, the tracker, the dummy head. I love that while he's wearing that wet towel wrapped around his. That's a really fun idea. And to be fair to Arnold Schwarzenegger, I doubt that Richard Dreyfuss or Patrick Swayze could have played that off, pulled that off. It works because it's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
The thing is, also, that is probably, thinking about it, the cheapest cosplay that you can have for a Comic Con as well, isn't it? So I'll have to have a look into that one.
Also, he always makes that noise, doesn't he?
We have another suggestion in the live chat here. Showgirls could be also going on the list. According to Steph, he says, I'm the only person I personally know or even know of who considers Showgirls an excellent movie, built around a hero's journey, as gripping as that portrayed in any martial arts epic, conveying a profoundly moral message. As I say, I know that the intention behind Showgirls was pretty noble. It just had a rather hairy-palmed reputation by the time it came out, which I suppose I can understand that.
No, I like Showgirls, and I have the 4K, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. Showgirls, it's an odd one because when it came out in '95, it was hated across the board, and I think everybody back then missed the point. They did. If you watch, and I would say anybody watch it now. You have to look at it as a comedic satire with a genuine message. And if the same message were to be examined today, it would be an absolute nightmare that makes Barbie look level-headed. It would be a nightmare if it were done now.
I think today's generation only see the surface.
Yeah, and and with Showgirls, the problem was everybody reviewed it as a serious movie. It isn't a serious movie. It's actually, I think it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. When you look at certain scenes, I'm like, how can you look at a scene like I Love Doggy Chow and say they were trying to be serious with that?
Well, having not really seen, I don't think I've ever seen Showgirls, to tell you the truth. I think I get mixed up with something else.
It's been about 20 years for me.
None of Verhoeven's other films are serious, so I 100% serious. So I see no reason to believe why that one would be. Obviously, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And disturbing scene, by far the most violent and disturbing scene.
We'll have to put that on the list as well.
So what Ian was just saying about that the younger generation now, and they watch films and they don't see other layers in films, essentially. Would you say now then that, unlike us, where we grew up with films and we collect them and we watch them again and again and again and we never get tired of them, does the current generation, do they just literally do a one and done and they just don't watch it again, do you think? Or
I think the culture is very different. I think the generation of today is very different.
It's more disposable.
Yeah. Also, I mean, everybody says TikTok and that you blame it on TikTok, but it isn't. It's their lack of they can't stand tension for some reason. Also, if you look at certain films, right, even in its day, it people look at it the wrong way. I'll give you one example, right? So I don't know if you know the film Straw Dogs.
Yeah,
Straw Dogs?
yeah.
Right, so
love the original one. I love the original movie.
Yeah.
In the beginning sequence, right? Susan George is walking through the little tiny Yorkshire village. And she's not wearing a bra, right? And you can see her little nipples, and she's walking, and all these guys are looking at her and stuff like that. The critics of the day were going, "Oh, that's disgraceful," portraying a woman like that, blah 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 blah. But there was an interview with Peckinpah, and he said the whole point of that idea is to show that they were backwards, and she was, she was
the progressive one.
In New York, no one would look at her twice. And all those people that were just backward. That was the whole point of the scene. But that's what I'm saying. You only some people only look at the surface, but they don't look at what the scene actually means. And that's just one example.
Yeah.
even in
Yeah,
that
Straw
day,
Dogs
they
is a
didn't see
fabulous,
it. Yeah,
fabulous
they didn't see it
movie.
in those days. So
Yeah.
you know, and I'm sure Bostrek's talking about Showgirls. I'm sure there's loads of scenes in there that people just look at the surface, but they don't look below it. You know. So anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Vanessa Law in the live chat watching on YouTube says, I really didn't care about Arnold's acting. Everyone else was good, so I just didn't care much. Not really sure why. Yes, it certainly didn't harm Arnie at all. He got to show his comic side that same year in Kindergarten Cop, the Ivan Reitman comedy movie. I do love that film. I haven't seen that for a very long time. And as you mentioned earlier on, Chris, he was the star of the biggest movie of the 90s, one of the biggest movies of all time, the following year, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Whereas Paul Verhoeven went on to Basic Instinct in 1992, reuniting with Sharon Stone and starring Michael Douglas. This is a fantastic film. People only ever talk about the one scene. In my view, this is a far better film actually than Total Recall. I love Basic Instinct.
I love how they make Michael Douglas a real freaking idiot in this film. His character is a total idiot, wasn't he? Let's face it. Yeah, it's a good film. Really good film.
Absolutely excellent stuff.
Again, I haven't seen that in probably 20 years.
Keep coming up against movies. Keep rediscovering movies that I haven't seen in a very long time either, and adding more to the list, the listed list.
Made his mark though in Hollywood, didn't he, Paul? Made his mark, and then he got so fed up, and he just went back home.
Seems so.
Another Arnie film that I love that doesn't get talked about much these days is Twins. I always loved Twins.
Love Twins.
Twins. We reviewed
Great
Twins
stuff.
on an early edition of this very show, didn't we?
Brilliant.
I think we did it about 18 months ago.
It's because
Superb.
comedies are largely forgotten. Nobody talks about Twins. Kindergarten Cop is remembered for a few memes, although the less said about Junior, the better. I made the mistake of seeing that. Good Lord.
But that was the thing about Arnie, right? He was clever. He was much more clever than Sylvester Stallone, because he realized that he couldn't stay to one genre. He had to mix it up to be remembered. But Sylvester Stallone only stuck to one genre, didn't he? Which is the action thing. It's always to do with action, isn't it? Apart from Throw Mama from the Train, but we all know why. We all know why he did that because of Arnie.
There's
isn't
also
yeah.
Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, I think was the other.
That's it.
Sorry, I got the wrong. I got mixed up there. It was Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. It wasn't Throw Mama.
Yeah.
It wasn't that one.
Did any of you ever play the Total Recall arcade or computer game?
Amiga. Yeah.
I never did.
Well, I did in the arcade.
Yeah. It was every arcade have it. I can still see the arcade machine right now with that big Total Recall poster.
Yeah.
Well, this came along at the right time for me, because not only was I loving Total Recall as a film, but I played the game on the Amiga, but also a game called Flashback came along on the Amiga, which was superb. And it almost made me feel like I was in the Total Recall universe with that game, because it had that sort of dystopian future sort of feel to it. So I was in my element at the time. It was a really good time for sci-fi movies and games. It was great. You know, take me back.
It makes me wonder, what is it because of the passing of time that things are considered a piece of art? Because Total Recall was slammed by a lot of critics, but now if you ask a critic what you think of Total Recall, they'll probably say it's a decent film, it's this, it's that, whatever. So the question is, how do you measure something?
Yeah,
when something is unashamedly populist.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, particularly 30 odd years ago, the domain of the critic, it was very much a stuffy profession, and critics always looked down their nose. Populism was something that shouldn't be indulged.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why there was that massive disconnect between people who would review movies then and those who would pay to see them. I think it's a very different landscape.
Movie companies' payroll they're on now, aren't they? Pretty much, where before it's they're giving it a 5 out of 5, and getting all the perks given to them. So it's it's a different time. But I don't know. I think in the current era that we're in, certainly, I think a lot more people are looking back now, and they're going back to movies from the past, and they're you know, if they didn't watch it before, they're watching it for the first time. If they watched it years ago, they're reevaluating something they watched years ago, and they're finding joy in a lot more stuff that they didn't watch at the time. So there's such a vast catalogue that you can enjoy. So all the bad stuff now, it doesn't affect me because I can always put one of these on. It's great.
It was fun, Vanessa. I thought
Lots of people in the live chat. I've never seen Showgirls, so we may have to convert a few people to that. Plenty of people, of course, remember the work of Philip K. Dick. He was the guy who wrote "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep" too, wasn't he? Which became Blade Runner, the 1982 classic film starring Harrison Ford, wasn't it? There were plans to adapt another Philip K. Dick short story into a sequel to Total Recall. Did you know about this?
there was. There was.
And this kind of morphed as well, just like Total Recall did. It eventually ended up in the hands of Steven Spielberg and became the Minority Report. So it was originally Total Recall 2, The Minority Report. That was the film that Carol Co were going to make, but of course Carol Co ended up with massive financial problems. However, when did Minority Report come out? 2005-ish, something like that.
2002, I believe.
Yeah.
But there was
earlier.
There was a screenplay written with Arnie's character in it and stuff like that. And
okay.
they had to rewrite it.
I really like Minority
Return of
Report.
Quaid.
I'm trying to remember when did Kuroko fold? I think it was like mid 90s.
I think it was after Terminator 2, was it? After Terminator 2?
There was the two of them. Kuroko, they made the more quality films, and then you had Canon, which was enjoyable.
This Canon.
Mission in Action, and
so defunct. So December 22nd, 1995.
Wow.
Okay.
And their last film was, I've just got my Wikipedia here. Cutthroat Island.
That was a massive flop, wasn't it?
And their last film, so Stargate '94, that was huge. Last of the Dogmen, which I've never seen. Showgirls, which was a flop, and Cutthroat Island, which is believed to be one of the biggest flops of all time.
Yeah.
So Cutthroat Island.
It's just been released, isn't it? I think Cutthroat Island recently on 4K. Is that right?
It's not a bad film, tell you the truth. I watched it. It's not bad.
I don't think I ever saw it. I was part of the problem. I was part of the problem. Oh god!
It killed Kuroko. It killed Gina Davis's career.
Yes, it did.
I think up until maybe Disney in 2023, I think it was the biggest flop budget to box office of all time. Or I know it was really close, but now it makes sense that they had two massive flops back to back, and Cutthroat Island was not cheap. So R.I.P. Kuroko, and I don't care if they made schlock. I loved Canon, but I think they went died around the same time.
Yeah, they went too far, didn't they? I mean, who's not going to say no to Chuck Norris, man?
I know.
And finally, we've mentioned it several times, but Total Recall itself was remade in 2012, starring Colin Farrell with Jessica Biel and Kate Beckinsale. That must have been a tough couple of months at work.
Colin Farrell. Yeah, was I calling him Colin Firth? I think I was.
Yeah.
I think this was directed by Len. Was it Len Weissman who directed this one, Chris?
Yes.
Yes, it was. I would say it plays better now than it did in 2012, but that's only because, as bad as 2012 was, we could pray for those quality of films now, because what we get now is so much worse.
Yeah.
You look back at that range, I'm like, how could things get worse? Oh, they did. It's almost like a time capsule. The films made in the early 2010s. You can tell it was made as soon as the dubstep starts in the background. This is.
Len Wiseman, right? There's one film that I really liked what he made, and everybody doesn't like it. They think it's crap. I think Die Hard.
I love Die Hard 4 as well.
I think Die Hard 4 is that, apart from the ending.
Is that 4.0? That one,
Well, sorry, what you say?
4 is great. 5 is an abomination.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I did like that one with when he was in New York and the helicopters and all that stuff.
And the
it was
car.
great.
Yeah.
It was definitely a Die Hard movie. Other than that stupid one where he went to Russia, they just completely killed the franchise with that one, didn't they? It's a shame. Yeah.
Oh, going all around the houses here again. But we've been reviewing Total Recall, the 1990 classic. I think the position that we've arrived at is that, for better or worse, that the film is absolutely a classic that people should definitely go back to at the earliest available opportunity. I think you're guaranteed a really good time with this film. Thank you, everybody, for all of that. Yes, so it's getting late, everybody. It's time for us to charge off. Yes, so thank you everybody for your company on this one. John, this was your pick this time. Total Recall. Have you scratched the itch now? You happy?
No, I need more. Give me more. I'm going to watch Predator after this. That's where I am.
That's exactly what I said to her. The sights and sounds and thoughts of Total Recall going to stay with me. I don't know when the next time is I'm going to rewatch this, but it's never a waste of a couple of hours. I think if I may upgrade to the Blu-ray at some point, I don't know. Chris, been great to have you back, the mighty Bowles Trek, back on YouTube. So if people want to hear more from you, where can they find you? I think people probably know already, but it doesn't hurt to remind them, does it?
Just look up Doctor Who Bad Person. You'll probably find me. I make videos whenever I feel like.
You're a naughty boy.
For the last few years, I've been mainly on live streams. I just spent 8 weeks of my life every weekend reviewing a certain thing, which shall go nameless, which sucked the life out of me. So I'm taking a little bit of a break for making videos to so I can enjoy my weekends. But you can find me on the YouTubes. I'll be making more videos. The goat is still on the lam after the wood chipper incident, but that's planning to come back.
That's not a promise. That's a threat. Yeah.
He wants to come back. So I don't know. He's very angry with the state of the world right now. Apparently. Well,
we're always happy to hear the both of you back, and even if they don't get it, we absolutely do get it, and we'll have you back any time.
And well, you can find me at the Bulls Trek. I've got my 2 YouTube accounts. I've got the Dumpster Fire, known as my Bulls Trek account. So if you want to lose faith in humanity, just go to X/Bulls Trek. If you want more civilized conversation, where I post pictures of various movies and things I'm watching, I have my alternate identity, which is Cultivated Media. So I've got that account where if you want to talk about fun things. At one point, I actually had that certain word of that certain show banned from that account. I found out you could do it, so it wouldn't actually post. I've removed that because I posted about it this week. But yeah, that's my other thing. So that's
until then.
Awesome stuff. Always a pleasure. You're going to come back and talk about Logan's Run with us at some point, and Showgirl. So I've put you down for both of those, Chris.
Oh, I'll be back.
Yeah,
I'll be back.
Ian, Ian, always a pleasure, mate. If people don't know, where can people find you? And give them the details about Rebecca Gold as well, because you're filming Rebecca Gold 2 at the moment, but people can help, can't they? Where can people contribute and get involved?
I'm on X, as everybody knows. But yeah, I've got a GoFundMe, which is basically on the Rebecca Gold Facebook page, and also on the Rebecca Gold YouTube. Also, right, I've got 1.99 subscribers. It'd be nice to go over it. Just one person I need to subscribe. Please subscribe to the Rebecca Gold channel. That's just either one person. Yeah, so if you're that one person, thank you. But
Yeah.
anyway,
So
Yeah,
somebody
so,
put a link
yeah.
in the thing. Just to anybody, just subscribe to Rebecca Gold.
subscribe. Yeah, just
I
subscribe.
don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure the three. I would subscribe again, but I've only got the one account. So okay, so here's the goal. Somebody subscribe to it so we can at least get into $2,000.
That's right. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Next time he'll be going, oh, I'm only on 5.99. Can you?
And how about you, John? Where can people hear more of you and see more of you? You've got your own YouTube channel as well, haven't you? You've started your own channel.
Thanks. So I'm on X as well, as people will see, Gallifrey 11. And then I've got my YouTube channel, which is Sci-Fi Chronicles, which is just me talking about Doctor Who reviews from 1963 to present day, and then also talking about other sci-fi shows and movies as well. So early days, but it's good fun. So yeah, check it out, everyone.
Knock your
And I'm
socks
here,
out.
and I'm enjoying myself with these guys as well.
And yes, you can find me on Instagram and X as the Spacebook, where I'm wheezing and groaning, ranting and raving about all things geeky inside and outside of the TARDIS in movies, comic books, TV, and now and again, the real world. I do have a real life in the real world, believe it or not. And I now and again share little nuggets of that across social media. So you can find me on X in particular. That tends to be where I'm a little bit more active. Thank you for all the comments so far. But that's it. We've come to the end. We've hit the wall. We've hit the wall. That's us listed again here on Total Recall. More comments. Keep the comments coming, everybody, and your suggestions for future movies and TV shows from decades past for us to fast return to here on future editions of the show. So the deal is that if you keep watching us, then we'll keep watching. But we'll see you all again soon. Bye bye.